Today we're going to be looking at randomness in Hearthstone. That and more this week on Tiny Voices. Mind Vision. Put a copy of a random card in your opponent's hand into your hand. Arcane Missiles. Deal 3 damage, randomly split among all enemies. Mare Noggenfogger. All targets are chosen randomly. Add 3 random mage spells to your hand. Transform all enemy minions into random ones. Cast a random spell one less. For each spell that you cast. Each turn this is in your hand. If you're holding a dragon, it's chosen in your hand. Last card your hand. Summons a random copy of their hand plus your random minion at the start of your turn. At the beginning of your turn, add 5 minions and random draw next to your deck. More. Hearthstone has a high degree of randomness. And to that you might say, well obviously, it's a card game. All card games are inherently random. Well, it's true that all card games have an element of randomness to them. Hearthstone has quite a bit more. What all card games have in common is shuffling your deck and drawing cards from the top. You can rarely ever be certain what you're going to draw next, and you might not always get what you want or need at the time. However, this can be mitigated by proper deck construction. By building your deck with duplicates of cards, for instance, you increase the possibility of drawing at least one of those duplicates at a reasonable point in the game. If you can have 30 cards in a deck, by including just one duplicate of a card that you need or want, you go from a 1 in 30 chance of drawing a specific card to a 1 in 15 chance. Furthermore, by adding card draw mechanics to your deck, you increase the rate at which you cycle through it in search of what you need. You can also aim for redundancy in mechanics, or solutions, if you want to put it that way, including multiple cards that solve the same problems that you're likely to run into. And many card games allow you to throw back your opening hand and draw again for a chance at a better opening. You can mitigate the randomness inherent in drawing cards, is what I'm trying to get at. But Hearthstone doesn't just feature this one element of randomness. Hearthstone builds unpredictable outcomes into the cards themselves. Cards like Yogg-Saron, whose card text reads, Battle Cry, cast a random spell for each spell that you've cast this game. Targets are chosen randomly. Meaning, if you have cast 5 spells all game long, and then play Yogg-Saron, he will pick 5 random spells from the entire pool of spells in the game, and cast them with completely unpredictable targets. Enemy minions, the enemy hero, your hero, even Yogg-Saron himself can be a target. Some of the random effects in Hearthstone are exhibited through entire keywords, like the Discover keyword, which presents you with 3 randomized options and allows you to pick one. Your opponent has no knowledge of what options were presented to you or what you chose. Adapt is a recent keyword that presents you with 3 randomized options out of a pool of 9 in total and allows you to pick only one to apply to a minion. Entire class identities have been built around random effects. Warlocks have a number of cards which discard random cards from your hand when played. Mages have a number of ways to generate random spells. Rogues are capable of adding random cards to their hand from their opponent's class. And Hearthstone now is more random than Hearthstone was at its launch. It's been getting more random over time. Reddit user I am not on Reddit at work crunched the numbers and found that out of the 372 cards that Hearthstone launched with, only 29, or 7.8% of them had a random effect. As of the most recently released expansion, Journey to Ungoro, 32.6% of the expansion's cards had a random element to them. And with the injection of those 135 new cards into the overall pool, Hearthstone's total percentage of cards with random effects is now just over 20%. 1/5 of all Hearthstone cards do something random. Hearthstone's use of randomness has been controversial. Debates about the inclusion of this type of variability crop up often on forums, and a number of highly ranked streamers and pros have lambasted design decisions which focus on RNG, and some have even quit playing the game altogether over it. So why has Blizzard designed Hearthstone to be so random? During a fireside chat at Blizzcon a few years back, Blizzard clarified that they don't see randomness and skill as mutually exclusive, and in fact they include randomness in Hearthstone partially because the ability to navigate the novel situations that random effects provide is a sort of on-the-fly decision-making skill. They think the number of unique and unpredictable situations that occur due to random effects makes the game more interesting. It can also add a sense of drama and provide swings and momentum that make comebacks slightly more likely. Finally, randomness exists in Hearthstone to aid less experienced or skilled players. That's hard to deny. It lets a weaker opponent pick up an occasional victory over a more skilled one. But hopefully it doesn't mean that they can beat a more skilled opponent consistently. The same is actually true of poker. A novice might be able to luck his way into beating an ace poker player on one hand, but over the course of many hands, the pro is going to come out ahead over and over and over again consistently. And that should be the goal in Hearthstone. Too much variance and the game may as well be a coin flip, but the latter statistics and stats on tournament performances don't support that being the case. Top Hearthstone players are capable of achieving a degree of consistency in their tournament runs. There's an argument to be made that the degree of consistency is still too low for a competitive game, but that's an entirely separate tangential topic. For now, I want to end by focusing on how randomness is mitigated, along with which random cards serve as examples of good design and which swing too close to being about flipping a coin. I mentioned earlier that the Warlocks have a class identity and deck archetype centered around discarding random cards from your hand. Usually the trade-off for losing a random card is a minion which is overstated for its mana cost, like the Lakari Fellhound, or is a card with a useful card text in addition to high stats, like the Doomguard, which has charge in addition to being a 5/7 minion for 5. With the release of One Night in Karazhan, Blizzard looked toward allowing players to construct decks, which further mitigated the harmful drawbacks of the discard mechanic. They added a card known as Malchezaar's Imp. It's a 1/3 demon for 1 mana which causes you to draw a card every time you discard one, so you're never left starving for things to play, at least. Additionally, they added the Silverware Golem, a 3/3 for 3 mana, which when discarded is instead put on the field. This created the Discard Zoo archetype. It made a set of cards with a very random drawback consistent enough to play and perform well with. This is an example of a good way to smooth out randomness. Another is by designing cards with a random effect that doesn't have a huge amount of variance in their possible outcomes. Lightning Storm is an AoE spell that deals 2 to 3 damage to each enemy minion that it hits. That's a very low amount of outcomes. It's either going to be 2 or 3. That means that you can plan around that small number of variables. You can work with that. You can counterplay. Adaptation works because you have 3 options to choose from a possible 9. If you're trying to solve a specific problem, there are likely at least 2 traits in the pool of 9 that can benefit you, so you have a statistically higher likelihood of rolling something that's at least decent. And, importantly, whatever modification is made through the adapt mechanic, that knowledge is immediately visible to both players. So for example, if you need a minion to stick to the board a little bit better, you can adapt it to have +3 health, Divine Shield, or Stealth. All 3 of those are decent options. You're going to be presented with 3 choices, and you have a 1 in 3 chance of discovering at least one decent option. There's clearly going to be an optimal solution for a given situation, but the degree of variance doesn't swing between abysmal and game-changing, it swings between good and best. It's an acceptable range of variability. On the other hand, the Discover mechanic is an example of Hearthstone's RNG at its worst. The Discover mechanic leaves the opposing player with no information, and there are too many possibilities in the discovery pool to possibly formulate any kind of strategy that can hope to account for all the possible outcomes. In essence, there's no counterplay when somebody drops a Draconid Operative, which goes on to discover another Draconid Operative, which keeps going 11 more times. Or when a rogue steals one of 40 plus possible cards from you. Hearthstone is going to continue to be random. Knights of the Frozen Throne, the new expansion, has had all of its cards revealed, and there are plenty of random effects to be found in its massive set of new cards. What we can only hope for, and what we should be telling Blizzard, is to be thoughtful about what type of randomness they include, because some types are far more frustrating to deal with than others. And with that, that's going to do it for this week's Tiny Voices. Hope to see you guys next week. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take it easy. Have a good one.